So I'm very pleased to be able to welcome one of the contributors of the case studies within the guidelines, and that's Anne Jaluzot. And Anne is a urban planner. She has 19 years experience, primarily from the US and the UK, in environmentally led approaches to urban policy, design, and regeneration. Anne now works as an independent consultant, continuing to advise on, assess, facilitate, and lead on the development of tools, strategies, projects, and knowledge on urban greening. She conducted the research and writing of the Trees and Design Action Group's latest publications, Trees in the Townscape, a guide for decision makers, Trees in Hard Landscapes, a guide for delivery. And during this conference, Anne has also been important for AIPH. She was one of the original brains behind the Green City Awards that we launched earlier, and we're very pleased to be continuing to work with her over the years on these projects. Anne is going to talk to us about a case study of Barcelona, the city which changed traffic patterns, replacing roadways with living green and increasing social interactions and reducing pollution. So it's with great pleasure I introduce the presentation of Anne Jaluzot. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Anne Jaluzot. I'm a green infrastructure planning consultant, and I was privileged to be asked by the AIPH to help develop the case studies that are featured in its updated Green City Guidelines. Today, I'm going to share with you the Barcelona example. Barcelona, despite being in the top 5 cities in Europe for population density, is managing to retrofit a significant amount of green space within its most built-up areas. While the solutions they're using are not necessarily new, what I found absolutely fascinating with Barcelona's work is the scale at which they're managing to roll things out. And from that perspective, I think there's quite a lot to learn from them. You'll have to tell me what you think during the Q&A in a few minutes' time. Where did all these efforts stem from? Well, I think the issues Barcelona are facing today aren't new. They first peaked in the 1850s, at a time when Barcelona was growing at a faster rate than the rest of Spain, but was still enclosed in its medieval walls. In this context, Ildefonso Serra, who was a visionary engineer, conceived a large-scale, grid-based expansion plan that would unite the old medieval city center with 7 peripheral villages. The expanded and united area would become known as the Eixample. Serra's plan was meant to equally distribute space between buildings, streets, and green spaces. It on all major avenues, there were going to be shade-providing trees planted every 8 meters. The characteristic octagonal blocks, which were going to have on one of the main sides a widened footpath, allowing for the planting of a double row of trees, and each of those blocks were going to feature an inner garden. Now, in the 100 of years that it took to implement Serra's plans, many things fell through the cracks, especially the provision for the inclusion of plants, trees, nature, green spaces. Some of the ideas were not systematically implemented or were overwritten over time, as was the case with the inner blocks. And you can see on the right side of the slide the sort of infill that has happened since in many of the blocks. Other of Serra's ideas were just simply never trialed, never implemented, as was the case for the widened footpaths with double row of trees. So As a result, while Barcelona does have some green areas, and about a quarter of its total surface area is green space, virtually all of it is concentrated in either a park, the Park of Montjuic, or a peri-urban forest, the Serra de Col Cerola. And this is putting most of the urban fabric, and as a result, most of the city residents in a situation that's pretty close to that that existed when the expansion plan, Third expansion plan, was conceived. When I spoke with Gabino Carballo, who's a landscape architect and project manager for the city's Parks and Green Space department, he told me at the very beginning of our discussion about their work that they felt they had Barcelona with its air pollution and water supply issues had come full circle to where they were over a century ago. So this has led to very strong popular demand for change in the quality of public space, change also in the accessibility of green areas, which has put a lot of pressure on local politicians to support and implement urban greening programs, especially since the middle of the last decade. And there's been, since then, a continuous work underway, regardless of the political affiliation of the administration in place. Most of the work underway today is the grandchild of one strategic document, here shown on the left, the Barcelona Green Infrastructure and Biodiversity Plan 2020. This document was published in 2013. It provides it sets out a very wide range of actions to be undertaken, with the idea that enhancing the presence of nature and biodiversity within Barcelona will deliver substantial amount of social benefits for local people, and that's what the whole work around green space in Barcelona is predicated upon, really social benefits. The plan's strongest immediate impacts were twofold. First, it affected the management of the green spaces. As a result of the plan, a naturalization program was adopted, and that was designed to really ensure that all existing green space have a much more complex vegetation structure, allowing for the natural entry of fauna and flora, so long as they're not invasive, and so that a much better ecosystem services provision would result from the presence of those green spaces. This translated into, for example, the naturalization of tree surrounds that are being planted with companion herbaceous species that can help control the pests and diseases that affect street trees. Other practical examples include a much reduced use of chemical herbicides. Glyphosate is no longer used, and other forms of herbicides have been significantly cut down. About 60% of all parks and green space are subject to selective mowing regimes, and most feature an increased presence of flowering Mediterranean meadows instead of water and nutrient-hungry lawns. This is carried out even in historic parks, like in this slide, which shows the Parc de Ciutadella. The second change the green infrastructure and biodiversity plan had in the short term was related to organizational culture. When I spoke with Gabino Carvalho, he explained that, well, there was very poor coordination in the past between the Parks and Green Space Department and colleagues from planning or transport. He said to me, we didn't know how to work with architects, urbanists, and engineers. And all the group sessions that were held to discuss and explain the ambitions of the plan made a big difference in helping to create a shared understanding of how landscaping could be approached differently to deliver biodiversity benefits. This was helped by the production of a good gardening practice guide, which was initially produced for educating the city gardeners, but that was used also with colleagues cross-departmentally to demonstrate what could be achieved and how. The implementation of the Green Infrastructure and Biodiversity Plan experienced a new momentum with the publication of two more documents. One, a stimulus package, a stimulus program for the city's urban green infrastructure, and second, a tree master plan. Now, the stimulus program was really about enhancing the amount of budgets, the budgets that were allocated to capital investments for urban greening. And the tree master plan was meant to really help plan all the intricate work that was needed to deliver the ambitions in terms of increased canopy cover, increased species diversity, enhanced more tree-friendly pruning regime that were set in the biodiversity and in the green space and biodiversity plan. Both the stimulus program and the tree master plan have measurable targets, detailed work plans, and robust monitoring provisions, really helping change the pace and the scale of delivery. All of that work is being referenced and heavily embedded into the current climate plan. So, practically speaking, within the Eixample, this has led to the implementation of 4 programs. The super blocks, the green corridors, the reclaiming of the inner blocks, and a green roof program. I won't say very much about the work targeting the public realm, I won't say very much about the work targeting the private realm, the reclamation of inner blocks and the green roofs, because this is not where the big gains are in terms of surface area or ecosystem services. I will focus on the work targeting highways because of the gains that are being achieved, and also of the radical rethink that this work represents. The municipality and the inhabitants that I've been working with, I've really been asking the question, what should the street of the 21st century look like? For what uses should it be designed? With what material should it be designed? Etc. and etc. And this work really stems from a very simple mathematical observation. And that observation is made in the opening statement of the stimulus program for the city's urban green infrastructure. It states, Barcelona dedicates 70% of public space to private vehicle transport, which only accounts for 17% of the journey. And the overwhelming majority of journeys, that is 83%, are made on public transport, bicycle or by walking, and it's essential to reclaim this public space for the majority. And it carries on associating this reclamation process. It associates the idea of achieving a healthy living city for walking with the integration of urban greenery to the highway as sort of a delivery mechanism to guarantee success, as opposed to only space allocation, pedestrianization. The superblock were indeed first imagined and championed by Salvador Rueda in the 1980s, and as a very holistic approach. But the first implementation that were carried out in 1993 and then in 2003 only really focused on the pedestrianization aspect, so reallocation of space without much change of surface treatment in terms of introduction of vegetation or introduction of water permeable designs, etc. And not much also diversification of uses. Those weren't the multi-purpose community space Salvador Rueda has envisioned. The first true implementation of the concept was in 2016 in Poblenou. That was outside of the Eixample, but two more additional pilots were delivered in 2019 with Sant Antoni, which is shown here in this slide, and Horta, and 4 more have since been completed. The basic idea behind the superblock is to take an urban space devoted to one use, which is primarily, automobile traffic, and open it up to multiple uses: walking, cycling, playing, meeting. The idealized superblock was initially 9 square city blocks, 3 by 3. Within the superblock, streets are one way, and none of them allow traffic to cross the superblock straight through. Cars are limited to about 10 km per hour, with the idea that this is walking speed, and it allows for safe mixing. Parking for residents is mostly underground, so as to free up space at street level. And the space that's reclaimed is repurposed to enhance resilience to climate change through the integration of sustainable urban drainage and greater vegetation, as well as to meet local aspiration, whatever they may be. And here, on this plan showing the Poblenou superblock, you can get a sense within each of the squares or the streets of the diversity of layouts and uses that have been implemented. Some of the interventions are tactical in the sense that they rely on temporary measures such as planter box, easy to move urban furniture, vibrant paintwork. They allow to test many ideas quickly on low budget and carry out extensive consultation and competitions for ideas, ultimately providing opportunities to co-create the new space with residents and new users. This might also involve, those tactical space can involve some depaving, as was done here. In parallel to this work, the city did quite a lot of trialing around use of sustainable urban drainage systems, as shown here. As far as the green corridors, the idea was that it's an extension really of the superblock ideas, and the idea was to focus on long avenues that cross through large extent of the city and that are not so critical for motorized mobility, and to reallocate space to other transport modes than the cars and to other uses with a significant amount of space dedicated to vegetation. Here you see one of those avenues that has now 1 lane of traffic in each direction instead of 6 lanes of traffic total for cars. And on weekends, I think every other weekends, those green avenues are actually closed to any traffic to be solely dedicated to pedestrians and other non-motorized traffic or uses. Last November, the mayor of Barcelona, Ada Colau, has made an announcement saying it intended to turn the whole of Barcelona into one big superblock. Now, this latest iteration of the concept is somewhat of a merging of the superblock idea as I've presented to you so far and the Green Corridor program. It's going to be implemented first within the Eixample, as shown here on this slide. And the idea is that 1 in 3 streets will get greened up, and every resident will have a green square and a green street within 200 meters of their homes. This will require 20 new green streets to be created, and as well as 21 new squares. These squares and streets will be planted with trees that will shade an additional 6.6 hectares of land, and this plan will also result in the creation of an additional 33.4 hectares of pedestrian space. Work is scheduled to begin in 2022 with a budget of 38 million euros. That's about 35 million sterling, I think, and probably represents the most thorough revamp of a major European city so far this century. The exact design of these streets will be chosen from a public competition, the result of which will be announced next month. But the city has already created some tight specification. At least 80% of the street should be shaded by trees in summer. So 80% shading, 20% of the surfacing needs to be permeable, and at least half of this permeable paving needs to be planted to allow for water infiltration, rainwater infiltration. Priority needs to be given to creating safe space for children and for elderly people, and all public areas need to be equipped with public drinking fountains. So it's an interesting brief. Implementation will start with the Carrer del Consell de Sant and 4 squares that will created at some of the intersections that are along this avenue. The ambition is for the whole of the Eixample to for all the 21 streets and all the 21 squares to have been completed throughout the Eixample by 2030. This ambition is made somewhat easier by the fact that some of those streets have already been partially transformed to permit more social distancing during the pandemic. So they're sizing the opportunity that this has provided, but they are not framing the work underway as a direct response. They are highlighting the fact that it's providing an opportunity for a reset to the way urban space is used and by whom, and that this should be done before the crowds start to return strongly. Now, there was a study that was done in 2019 that showed, and that study was done by the Barcelona Institute for Global Health. It's a peer-reviewed work, and it estimated that if Barcelona, the municipality, managed to roll out the superblock model as it is envisioning to throughout the whole city, the Eixample and beyond, then this would result in the prevention of 667 premature death every year. The modeling that was done also showed that the life expectancy of the average Barcelona resident could increase by almost 200 days, saving the city 1.7 billion euros a year. So the gains are significant. And while that transformation is still years off, the announcement of the new city block, super block program in the Eixample suggests that Barcelona is well on its way. Thank you for listening. Please do have a look at the IPH's updated Green City Guideline, where you can find all the information I shared with you today about this case study. Thank you.